Ladies and gentlemen, this is Coda Jacobs, the crusader and visionary behind a brighter future in wrestling. If you're an honorable and noble public servant like myself, you are listening to the Game Changer Podcast.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Game Changer Podcast. Happy fall time, everybody. That just means that we are just a few months away from good old December, where we're going to get all the white stuff. Let's face it. I am NateFNGreat, the reminder of the white stuff that still exists, even though we had about 6 months of it this past year. And I'm being joined here by possibly somebody who could be a snow queen for all we know. That being the one and only, the fabulous, the very talented, and the always gorgeous VictoriBelle.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing pretty good. It's a nice day out so far, but that could all change because Wisconsin weather is really weird that way. How's it going for you?
It's beautiful out here in Chicago, but I also know that tomorrow is going to just be storms away, so, hashtag Midwest.
Hashtag Midwest weather, ladies and gentlemen. It is definitely interesting when it comes here. But we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about a lot of pop culture news, as well as a bit of a topic that I kind of have a little bit of a vendetta with, but I'll explain more when we get to it. So let's actually talk about some of the things that are going on with the news this week. So one thing that has been coming out, you guys, as of late, has been the details between George Lucas and Disney. According to a lot of sources, it definitely seems like George Lucas was betrayed by Disney, by the fact that it seemed like he was more than willing to go with selling his company to Disney, as long as they kind of went with some of his ideas when it came to the recent trilogies. Now, unfortunately, that did not seem to be the case, and even the president, Bob Iger, he came out saying, well, we kind of had an agreement, but in a very political way, he was basically saying that, we didn't go full on saying like we were going to do everything that he said. We were going to do some of the things he said, but not everything he said. So George Lucas kind of does feel like he is, he got backstabbed by the point that, apparently there was going to be a deal where they had like a different kind of character, a different kind of, not different kind of scenario, a different kind of story that would be happening with these new trilogy movies, but he definitely feels like, they just only went with certain aspects of it. I look at this as a situation where it doesn't kind of surprise me that Disney would do something like this, especially after the things that they've done, with Stan Lee and with a lot of other people who have gone through the, Disney, went through the Disney kingdom, we'll call it, or the Disney Empire at this point. It's just one of those situations where it is very sucky to see a great mind like George Lucas basically get the short end of the stick, where it's like, oh yeah, we'll pay you, but we're only going to listen to some of these things that you have. I mean, George Lucas, he has his moments where he can be a great mind. He is the man behind the original trilogy, but also the man behind the prequels, which certain parts of that I can't forgive you, Georgie, but at the same time, he gave us Star Wars nonetheless, so he definitely deserves a little bit more of a say than what Disney was giving him. So that's kind of like my thought process on that. You've definitely been one of those people that's been very vocal about, Disney trying to take over. So let me ask this, and maybe this will probably go into your response when it comes to this. Are you at all surprised that Disney, really just kind of went around the bush and just decided, hey, we're going to do what you suggested, but we're not going to do everything you suggested?
No, of course I'm not surprised. It's also, they own it now, so they can do what they want. Like, you can make all the promises you would like and be like, hey, no, we'll do it exactly like you wanted. You're fine. We're just buying and paying billions of dollars for it. We'll do it like your way. Like, no, they won't. They're going to do it their way. They're going to do it the way that they think will make the most money and the most profit, because that's kind of how business works. So I don't find that to be surprising at all.
Yeah, no. I think that's all we can really say about that. VictoriBelle, do you have anything for us to discuss this morning?
I think it's funny that we do kind of rag on Disney or praise Disney depending on the day. I definitely have the 10 MCU storylines we'll never get closure on. I don't know if I'm going to name all 10, but it basically is saying that, Disney and Sony and Disney and Netflix as splits are giving us, holes in possible storylines that we might never get closure on, and it's really the only person it's hurting are the fans. They talk about how Marvel's recent divorce with Sony will affect Peter Parker and the child caught in the middle, or the cliffhanger that Spider-Man Far From Home left on the character. They're saying that could possibly never be answered if we don't get total answers. They also say, on the other hand, like Netflix awkward split with Marvel left the streaming giant no option but to announce the cancellation of the shows Daredevil, Jessica Jones, and, Luke Cage, all of them. And they indicate Marvel Studios can't legally revisit those properties for 2 years. And then, more importantly, Disney Plus doesn't allow for shows without a family-friendly ribbon. So, any resurrection of those Netflix shows would need to be on a different platform, just because we all know those are not necessarily family-friendly. But it looks like the characters have died and the actors have moved on to other projects, leaving loose threads ready to unravel. And so there was going to be 10 more options or, in there. But just in general, I think that's a really interesting article if anyone wants to, look for more. I couldn't believe, all the different stuff that I didn't know Disney Plus wouldn't have anything that wasn't kid-friendly.
That probably means that they're probably not going to put the first and the second Deadpool on there, which shouldn't be really as big a surprise, because they're a whole family, wholesome, company. They can't just have this one guy who's literally one of the greatest things that's come to cinema be a part of that whole deal. So that doesn't surprise me. It does suck that we're not going to get, resolution when it comes to, as you mentioned before, Spider-Man and the Defenders. It's just really, it's frustrating, because there's a lot of people that really do love the series that you mentioned. They love the Nick Cage, the Jessica Jones. I think that also probably includes Daredevil too. They're not going to get that closure, like they said, of hey, this is how the series is going to end. It's basically just going to be in limbo for God knows how long until they do another reboot of it. So, just one of those things where it's like, okay, so great, you basically just killed off a lot of your characters. So the only way we're probably going to be able to see this is either in TV series from the past or by possibly comic books. Which, hey, there's still a thing, ladies and gentlemen. They still exist. So if you want something where there's no crazy drama or anything like that, go to a comic book store and definitely check out a lot of stuff there. So we got that option. But I really do hate that, because there's so many TV series, even if you don't incorporate Marvel stuff to it, that have just left on such stupid cliffhangers, or they have just not been resolved. I think one of the best examples of that was Firefly. They only had one season, and then they just went into a movie, and so many people loved that season. They loved the series, and they wanted so much more from that. But unfortunately, I guess they're not going to get that. I mean, I would love to just see maybe a reunion TV movie special, which I highly doubt that's going to happen. But I'm one of those people that loves the one season that they had. They accomplished a lot with that one season, and they accomplished quite a bit with that movie. That's something I'll definitely talk about in a later podcast. But yeah, it's just another situation where it's hey, you got a great series, but we're not going to finish it up. Perfect.
Yeah, it's disappointing to the fans of those series, but just in general, I just think it's very interesting to know that Disney Plus isn't going to have any mature anything on it. It sounds like
Yeah,
if
not
it's
much
not
different.
family friendly, they're not going to have it. And I think that's going to be an issue.
I agree. 100% agree. What probably will not be an issue is the fact that there are certain movies that Disney is going to be producing that are probably going to still be pretty good hits. Now, obviously, when we heard that there was going to be a sequel to Frozen, we knew that it was going to be very interesting because Frozen is a classic. How are they going to do that? First trailer that came out, it definitely shows a little bit more of a darker, edgier side of this Frozen universe. This new trailer, they definitely go a little more in depth of what the story is behind what's going to be going into Frozen 2. Apparently, they're going to be discovering this, like, quote-unquote, like, long-lost village that was a part of the kingdom, but now they aren't for some weird reason. They had, like, this deal where it's like, oh, there's this fog, people go in, but they don't come out, and stuff like that. It's like, okay, this is interesting. But there is a conflict in here in which they're showing, in the first movie, Elsa kind of used her magic to, keep people away. In this one, it definitely shows, like, the power is getting to her head, which, honestly, I think is actually a really good story to have in there, because now they're kind of showing the edgier side of, hey, it's great to have this kind of power, but at the same time, when you have that much power, sometimes that can be a very lethal deal. I think there's a lot of great, cases and examples of people who have just, let the power go to their head, and it changes them into a totally different person, which I think is what we're going to be getting with this Frozen 2 movie. So I'm very interested in seeing where this goes. I'm not going to reveal too much about it. I cannot really do it justice, but that is what I'm getting out of it. So definitely check out the recent Frozen 2 trailer that was released. It is something that definitely gives a little more insight of what we can expect with this sequel, as well as probably some very different themes than what we would see from the original. It definitely is, like I said, darker and edgier, but I'm kind of interested in seeing where this is going. I think we kind of talked about this a little bit. Maybe it was like a couple months ago when we first saw the trailer, where it was like, it seems like they're focusing on a different season. Like in the first one, it seems like it's focusing on winter. This one seems like they're focusing more on the autumn time, the fall time. So maybe we are still going to be getting 2 more sequels that focus on the summer and the spring. Maybe it's a situation where, Elsa loses her power completely. Who knows at this point? But I'm very interested in seeing where this movie goes. It looks absolutely spectacular. The animation looks great. I'm just very interested in seeing which direction they're going with, I guess you could say, this new season.
Yeah. I've seen it. It looks pretty good. It's interesting how it almost looks like she can control water now. Instead of just ice, like she was like riding a water horse or something. And it just seems like she's in over her head, and it looks like Anna is there to help her as usual. And I liked, like, they had one conversation in that said, like, you can't run into the fire if I'm in the fire, like, to save me. And she's like, well, then stop running into the fire. And it's like, oh, snap. But it just looks cute. I'll probably enjoy it.
Well, I think we'll enjoy it more than the other 2 big Disney movies that they, promoted. We've already discussed them. We've already had a lot of conversations about them. There's no more salt for me to give for those 2 movies. I'm sorry, guys. But moving on from that, did you have anything else that we should discuss?
Yeah, I just had one more, just a funny thing that we kind of talked about. I thought it was hilarious. Like, we've been talking about Apple and all this stuff, and Microsoft, and apparently Steve Jobs personally called Disney's CEO to tell them that he hated Iron Man 2. And so, it's funny. It's an excerpt, apparently, from Bob Iger's recently released book, The Ride of a Lifetime, Lessons Learned from 15 Years of the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. Which is interesting. Maybe it's something you got to pick up and read. But yeah, he was blunt with them, telling the Disney executive that Iron Man 2 was more or less a horrible movie. And, that's really, really funny to me. I think that it's hilarious that one billionaire would call another billionaire. It's like, I hate your work. I'm like, oh, okay. But, all the talks of Steve Jobs and Disney, and Steve Jobs would want to, invest in Disney. It's funny that he came out with a book that literally says, he didn't support some of his work, and I think it's funny.
It is pretty funny to hear that, and I'm just kind of curious why he picked Iron Man 2 of all of them, because I think a lot more people have issue with the third one, because it basically was a movie that was setting up for, I want to say the Avengers, if I'm not mistaken, but...
He might have, I'm pretty sure he died before that, so...
Okay.
He might have died before Iron Man 3 came out.
Oh, okay. No, that makes more sense now. Who knows? Maybe he's not a fan of Mickey Rourke, for all we know. we're not going to go into too many details about that. But,
yeah. Apparently, the Disney CEO basically was like, we were really good friends throughout our career.
Oh gosh.
And he still says, that he believes that Disney and Apple could have merged if Jobs had passed away at the age of 56. And he's like, if he was still alive, we would have combined our companies or at least discussed it. And no one else cares. I feel like I'm the only one who cares about that. What this guy is saying about Apple.
No, it is one of those things that I do personally think is just very out of bad taste. I get it. There is a part of him that's trying to make it seem like he's the good guy when it comes to this, but again, it's in a very political way, which does not really work out so well.
Yeah. If the creator was still alive, he would have given the company to me. What? Dude, stop it. You're fine. You have a huge company. Go cry yourself a river somewhere else.
Yeah.
Also, Apple doesn't, or you know what? I don't necessarily know, but I'm wondering what Apple owns that Disney wants. Besides the obvious what Apple owns, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It must be the streaming, because they also announce their streaming services, and Apple is well versed in a lot of different things, but I wonder if they own some stories or something that Disney wants to get their hands on. Maybe
they want to get their hands on the Steve Jobs story and try to make a movie out of that, because we know they would do a great job at that.
I mean, there's already two, so hopefully we don't need another one.
Well, apparently Hollywood's running out of ideas and they need more revamps and remakes and blah blah blah, so wouldn't surprise me at all. The final thing I wanted to discuss was, I guess this kind of ties in, is the fact that they made an announcement, but via a picture, that the third installment of the Jurassic World series is going to feature the original 3 characters from the Jurassic Park movies. So, of course, this is going to include Jeff Goldblum, Sam Neill, and I'm trying to remember her name. I'm gonna get her name out before this is even over. But it basically is showing them at they're showing the original Jurassic Park deal where they're going up the stairs and there's the dinosaur bones in the middle of the deal. And they're basically saying, this is happening. It's oh, well, this is going to be very interesting, to say the least. Lauren Dern, okay. That was the third one. So, Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm are going to be making the returns to the big screen, although Ian Malcolm did make his return during Jurassic World 2 to do a court scene, where apparently that was the best thing of the entire movie, and it was, to be honest. Why a courtroom scene would be the greatest thing since A Few Good Men is just kind of baffling to me, but at the same time, it's Jeff Goldblum. He's on a roll. He's doing great. And him as Ian Malcolm is kind of one of those things that we were kind of, it's like a guilty pleasure. You kind of like seeing him, even though he's not the greatest character of all time. You just love the fact that he just comes in talking about a chaos theory and just being that kind of person. Jeez, just I'm excited for this because now you got the original three, then you got combine that with Bryce Dallas Howard and Chris Pratt. In all honesty, I am looking forward to seeing how Chris Pratt interacts with the three of the original characters. I'm very interested in seeing how Bryce Dallas Howard combines with this. I'm very curious to see how they can redeem themselves after the second one. Because let's face it, while it was good, there was just parts of it that were just really, really dumb. The whole cloning thing just so stupid. Just no. And also there's a scene where the Indominaptor does like a cartoon deal where he's playing dead and he distracts the guy and he does this cartoony like smile deal while the guy looks at his tail. It's like, what? Oh boy, that is so bad. Why would you do this?
It's just very unrealistic. Which I guess if you talk about a cloning and reanimation of the dinosaurs, it can't be too realistic, but they could stick into the realm of reality. And we've talked about this in the Beast movies before, with Godzilla and Kong, and that was my biggest issue of Jurassic World in general, the new ones. They just, all of a sudden, like, a T-Rex is like, hang on, wait, guys, I'll save you. And then, like, turns, I know it doesn't, but, like, basically, like, turns and winks at them, like, I got you, thumbs up. And they're like, whoa, T-Rexes are so nice. And, like, it just doesn't make sense. So, hopefully, adding these amazing characters might add the realism back, because the original Jurassic Parks were pretty real. I liked it a lot. It would be great to have that back.
It is kind of one of those things where it's funny when you can look at a certain movie and just think, I kind of like the original ones better. Like, they do this revamp of, the original Jurassic World, and I got no problem with Jurassic World. I think it's an awesome movie. Even with the cheesy deals like you mentioned, where it's like the T-Rex is like, oh yeah, I got your back, it's cool. The weird battle scene at the end where it's like, oh, it's the Raptor and the T-Rex against the Indominosaurus Rex. For me, as a fan, I'm just nostalgic, like, oh my gosh, we're seeing two dinosaurs battle against another big dinosaur. I'm kind of okay with this. This is pretty awesome. And then in the end, it just gets, like, killed by a mosasaur. So it's kind of one of those things like, okay, well, that just came out of nowhere, but I'm kind of okay with that. Alright, so let's move on, you guys. We've covered the news stories. So the topic for today is talking a bit about the animation scene. Now, of course, we've mentioned, anime from Japan. We've mentioned a lot of animated series. But here's the heart of the matter. Back when we were kids, we actually do remember seeing, like, one anime cartoon after another. And it was really a good time for animation because it was a lot of times family friendly. It was a lot of times something that, you felt like you got something out of it, whether it was like a lesson, whether it was like just fun characters, a great story, and stuff like that. Obviously, as the years go on, we see a little more of that kind of deteriorating, whether that is, the great characters, the great stories, or the lessons behind it. And kind of wanted to talk about some of the examples of that and kind of comparing, some of the things from the present to some of the things from the past. So I'll kind of get the ball rolling on this one. First thing that came to mind when I thought of this deal is comparing or having a battle between two very similar cartoon series, and that being the classic of Ed, Edd n Eddy versus the kind of common, I don't know if it's still around, but I'm praying to God it's not, Squidbillies. Both kind of have the same deal. You have this main character that wants to do the scamming and wants to be kind of like the greatest thing that ever existed. The thing about it, though, is that with Ed, Edd n Eddy, they're kids. They are basically just scamming so that they can get money to buy candy, or they want to be like the quote-unquote richest people that ever lived. And you also have, the tropes of, here's the guy who comes up with the plan, here's the smart one, here's the downright dumb one. And the three of them kind of create this very interesting modern-day Three Stooges kind of deal. With Squidbillies, it's a lot different. You have this one main squid who has like a grandmother's squid as well as a kid squid. It definitely has like a hillbilly-esque like deal, but it gets to be one of those things where they just really take it down that hillbilly deal where they have, this guy, he wants to be with his quote-unquote the hottest woman there, which is basically a giant fluffy woman who they think is like the hottest deal. There's like the sheriff who's not even very confident at being a sheriff. It's kind of one of those things where you look at it and you understand, why they created this. For me, I look at this as a situation where it's like, wow, things are just going right down the shitter, aren't they? I've seen a couple of these episodes of Squidbillies, so I can definitely state the fact that I'm not a fan of it because of the fact that they do these really dumb episodes where, this guy's trying to, make a quick buck by maybe selling his son for something really stupid, or he's trying to kill basically his mom. He's trying to kill other people. It's one of those things where it's like, oh wow, it's fulfilling the hillbilly, stereotype. We've seen that a lot. I didn't need a whole series about that. It's just really, really stupid just seeing that. I don't know. Are you familiar with the Squidbillies series?
Yeah, I watched a bit of it, but yes, it's not really my cup of tea.
Yeah. So, I guess the point I'm trying to make with this is that, Squidbillies definitely kind of fulfills a certain, stereotype, but there's not really much that you can really grasp from this except for the fact that, oh, it's a guy who's just literally going to shoot his gun whenever he feels like, or he's going to try to have, adultery with some random woman that he thinks is hot. Whereas Ned, Ed, and Eddie, it's just harmless kid fun, really. You kind of look at some of these, stories, and there's kids that can kind of relate to what they're doing. Like, they do like the whole deal where it's like, hey, we'd love to get money so we can get candy. What kid doesn't want to do that? What kid doesn't want to, basically try to do like these wacky adventures of, maybe doing like clown deals, or they just try to scale. They even go into like the high school deal, which is really cool because you look at what they've been doing. They basically shows like, hey, they're evolving. It's not one of those things where it's just like, them during the summer all the time. No, they're going to show them, being at school. Ed and A, they're still trying to do the scams while they're at school, but they're also trying to live the high school lifestyles. So, kind of interesting to see that. So, it's one of those things where Ed and Eddie definitely does take the win on this one because of the fact that it does show a little bit more of the, family friendly, but also the family relatability that you can have with, a cartoon. That's just my thoughts on that.
Interesting. So you're going to be basically comparing an adult animation you don't necessarily like to a family-friendly animation that you do like?
In an essential way, yes.
Okay. I was going to just pick some adult animation that is actually really good, and I super duper enjoy.
Okay. All right, so you do kind of represent the opposite end of the spectrum, so this could actually be interesting.
Yeah, so I think it'll be good, but I agree with you. I don't think all adult animation is good. And I also, I guess even saying adult animation, I guess we're just calling it adult so that kids don't watch it, but animation in general is just another genre, and I think that it can be for all parties. I think it's good if it is for all parties, but obviously, the Deadpool thing, no, not all superheroes are meant for kids, and not all animation are meant for kids, because they do some nasty things, and that kids cannot handle. So, that would be my little spiel about that before I introduce, I have I have four, but one has 7 involved, but whatever. I'll start with the one that has 7 involved. And maybe it's gone on too long for people, but in general, I enjoy the Family Guy world. Steph MacFarlane's, world of Family Guy, Cleveland Show, American Dad. I don't know if he's made another one, but he basically made adult animation, and it's been, I don't know, it's had to have been almost 15 years of Family Guy at this point. Now, I think when I watch the show now, I'm kind of like, why? How is this still going? But I guess you could say that with The Simpsons too. It's one of those that people just love it. It's not necessarily smart. It's not necessarily great all the time, but it's funny and people love it. And definitely the Griffins in general from Family Guy, Peter Griffin, and the fact that Steve McFarlane makes all these voices himself is just impressive, and it's a great little storyline. I think that if anyone wants to have a stupid chuckle, that's a show that'll give it to you.
You know, it's kind of interesting you mentioned that, because that was the second series that I was going to kind of have my have my way with. Is, when it comes to the latter points that you kind of mentioned, it does feel like it's either repetitive or it just feels like there's no point to it. And I was actually going to compare that with the series Digimon. Now, before people go too crazy, let me explain. When you see the first season, you definitely do see that, the first season of Digimon, you definitely do see them just still, they're all being kids, they're all basically trying to, save the world and everything like that. When you get to the second season, the fact is that they've grown up a bit. And you kind of do see the transition of, being a grown-up, and you deal with, all the factors. There's a couple of factors where we see, some of the older Digidestined, they have to battle with the fact that, they're in high school. They're basically trying to, live on their lives. Matt's working with a band. Joe's trying to get into, college so that he can be a doctor. There's all these crazy things. I think that that's one of the reasons why it benefits more than it does with Family Guy. Because with the Family Guy, they do mention a couple deals where it's oh, hey, it's Meg's 18th birthday, and there's all these crazy deals hey, Chris is going to be going off to learn about, these certain colleges that he could go to. But that's about it. You never really see the characters, evolving. You never really see them getting older. They make jokes about, Stewie being, an older gentleman. They have that couple episode series where, older Stewie, goes back in time, and he basically sees, what could have been, where he finds out that, hey, because of this, incident, I started, started hesitating more. I started putting off my world domination deal, and it's kind of one of those things where okay, so we kind of do have some of these things where we could still see a lot of these situations where, he still could be battling against that whole deal, but maybe it's a situation where he can either call it back or something like that. We see hey, Stewie's going through his entire, kindergarten deals. He should be in first grade at this point, or he should be at least be in fifth grade at this point. So it's kind of the same thing like you mentioned with The Simpsons. It seems like it's going too long, and they're just staying in this realm, in this timeline. They could have some really good, moments. They could have the situation where they have, Meg's going off to college, and maybe it actually shows them not actually shitting on her for once. Maybe they actually show, Chris slowly actually becoming a man. He's actually starting to mature more than what he is. He's not turning into his dad. Maybe there's a situation where they actually deal with the, real topic of, honestly, of divorce, where maybe Lois and Peter are basically fighting so much that they're actually considering splitting up. We see, Stewie going into, the grade school days. One of the most emotional episodes was that episode where Brian was killed off for about a few weeks, and then they brought him back because they were too scared to do anything about it. They were too scared to bring in a different character. You got to take those kind of risks, and that's something that they did with the second season of Digimon. They took a risk on having these new characters, and yes, I do realize that I'm talking also about Japanese animation, and they already had this stuff planned out. But at the same time, they took a risk. They took a risk on different characters. They took a risk on a different generation, and it paid off very well. Honestly, Season 2 has probably one of the best villain backstories of all time, and that's with Ken. Don't believe me? Take a look. You can definitely probably find it on any kind of YouTube platform, or somebody does a biography about him, where they talk about his childhood, where they talk about how he lost his brother in a car accident, how he basically had to go. He's basically going through this metamorphosis where he becomes evil, but then he realizes that when he loses everything, that the one thing that he didn't want to lose the most is almost taken from him. It's literally one of those stories that is so well done, and it's so absolutely fantastic. It's one of those things that a lot of people definitely overlook. And honestly, I'm looking back and I'm like, God, season 2 is a lot better than I gave credit to. That's saying a lot. And it's one of those things that I look back at and think, damn, I really think that, the Digimon seasons were pretty damn good. So it is going into that evolving, not digivolving, but evolving factor where you have to find ways to move on and not be stuck in limbo. Because otherwise you're going to end up like The Simpsons, you're going to end up like Family Guy, where it's like you don't cover any of those real life situations where, hey, this person's going off to college, hey, this person's dealing with these kind of deals. Instead they make kind of a joke about these deals, which sucks because there's people that get offended by it. But
I don't know. I super disagree with you on all of that. Almost
super disagree. That's saying a lot, ladies and gentlemen.
It's just that what you're comparing two shows that I don't know if they can be compared. But obviously you did, so you compared them. It was allowed. It's allowed. I just don't think that every entertainment platform has to have a specific theme throughout it. I definitely think certain Family Guy episodes have their meat and potatoes that allow you to get that sense of fulfillment from them. But also, it's nice to have a show that you can just turn on and chuckle. It's a comedy. It's not supposed to teach you about doing the right thing and doing this. It's supposed to tell you, hey, look at all the trouble this guy gets into because he can't stop drinking, or that he turns into a woman for the day and how they accept it still and everything, because it's hilarious. And they touch on quote-unquote real-life things, but in general, it's not meant to be a show that you show your kids and, I hope you learned something. And The Simpsons are the same way. That's why they've been on so long, is that sometimes you just need that dose of dumb. Because your life is hard. Everyone's life is hard. And sometimes watching a show that just shows how hard life is all the time, over and over, is exhausting. And these shows are the moment of peace in people's lives where they can turn their brains off and just watch and enjoy.
I see your point. I definitely do see where you're coming from. Again,
you don't have to enjoy them. You don't have to like them. But that would be the point of them.
I enjoyed the earlier seasons, and I kind of see where they were really kind of, where they were kind of coming from. And Seth MacFarlane is a genius. So I am definitely going to be giving Seth MacFarlane so much credit. I mean, he's the guy who literally gave us the Ted movies, A Million Ways to Die in the West, as well as the... Gosh, I'm trying to remember that new series that he's in. He was doing
it's like a Star Trek series.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember that one. And apparently, from what I've been hearing, it's been pretty good from what it seems like. And hey, it's something that he really enjoys doing. I do know that he actually did an interview where he was asked the question, "Hey, when does Family Guy stop?" And he kind of just says, by the time it stops being funny. So he's kind of one of those things where it's if people are still getting a chuckle out of it, he's still going to create these deals. So we could be in for 20 seasons of Family Guy for all we know. But who knows? I think as long as people, still laugh, people still enjoy it, he'll still be making, the seasons. So got to give him props at least for, continuing that and also other projects.
And you don't have to like it. It's totally fine. I just think don't try to make it something it's not. It's definitely not supposed to have this story arc to follow this amazing character. If you're looking for that, it's not the right show for that.
Well,
it's stupid, and it's stupid, and it's supposed to be.
Well, I think I could kind of disagree with that, because there are a couple episodes that are indeed story based. And I think that those are mainly highlighted with the relationship between Brian and Stewie. But other than that, I do agree with you. They don't really have that much of a story arc where it's oh, hey, this is going to be a series of episodes that focuses on Meg and her deal going to college, or Chris and his deal going to manhood, blah, 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 that kind of deal. So,
yeah, I guess they do. They take it back. They're oh, Stewie killed Lois in a dream. So it's kind of funny that way.
It's like, oh, hey, Brian's dead. World is shattered. We're bringing him back. Wow, that is a tease. That is the worst kind of tease you could be. Now, maybe that's just me. Anyway, so what else did you have, or what kind of, I guess, mature content do you have for people to discover and possibly enjoy?
Yeah, well, do you want me to name the rest of mine, or did you want me to go off a little bit?
Yeah, I think I would like for you to go off a little bit. I think you have a little more to say than just, hey, check out this deal. Check out this deal. Check out this deal. Definitely give a little more detail behind them.
Okay, well, one that, I don't know if you've ever watched this one, but by just hearing you wanted more of like an arc and a real-life character themes, BoJack Horseman is a really interesting one, especially when you think of, like, just seeing it and it looks like a humanoid horse, and you're like, this is very awkward. What are we watching? And then you watch it and it's just kind of about a former celebrity just going through depression and hating himself, and just watching the way people react to him and the way he can never get anything done correctly because he has all these demons inside of him that can sometimes seem funny, but at the other end of the spectrum, you're like, oh my gosh, people actually go through this. Like, this is something that, it hits close to home to some people, and drug abuse and stuff like that. He has a friend who goes through that a lot, and he parties with her and just gets totally wrecked all the time, and then in one episode she finally dies, and he's like, what? What? Basically he felt like she was immortal almost, even though she would do all these crazy things, and it's just sad. Some of it's sad, but it's supposed to be a comedic series, and it definitely is. I mean, it's a lot of talking animals and human combos, which is very odd and a little distraught at first, when you first watch it, but it's literally about the Hollywood lifestyle and how BoJack Horseman was a child star and used to be a hit in the 90s, and now he's just trying to get back into the limelight and how he can make money, and it's just very hard for him because he just has a lot of these mental blocks that he can't overcome.
Okay, yeah, that actually does seem like a series I might enjoy. It is kind of cool to see that there are certain, series that do kind of follow that genre. Even though, there's some, like Family Guy, that could have that potential, it does serve its purpose, just being that kind of, haha, chuckle kind of deal every now and then. Whereas, with this one, it definitely seems like, well, okay, this is going to give you a little more furthering. I guess you could almost say a little more fulfillment if you love story-based stuff. So, gosh, yeah, that actually sounds really amazing. Jeez Louise. If they... So, I will ask this. So she dies, but she doesn't, resurrect... She doesn't get, resurrected or anything like that?
No.
Wow.
No, she dies.
They go all out for that. My God.
Yeah, I mean, they do, throwback episodes where she exists in it, because, it was before she died, but most of that's just his, benders of being drunk or high on cocaine or something, and
Jeez.
He's remembering her, and it's just, he's like, whoa, why are you here? And she's like, yeah, you're tripping. And then it's very Hollywood, drug issues and depression and all this that all mixed together. He definitely has a funny storyline. It's a humanoid horse, but it just shows you he's trying to get back on his feet, and everything he does kind of negates him trying to get back. He wants to get back, and then he does something that you're like, how is that supposed to help you? And that's kind of, I think, that the depression and other things that are mental blocks that just kind of destroy any progress because he feels he doesn't deserve it.
Dang.
It's interesting. It can be deep. These shows can be deep. Not necessarily Family Guy as much, but again, not every show should be, and not every show you want to watch is a show to make you cry. So,
all right, fair enough. Well, here's going to be the final one for me, and it's going to be kind of interesting because this actually is one of the series actually takes place in quote unquote the driftless region of Illinois. So this is kind of one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, they're taking another shot at Illinois for some reason. I don't know if they really mentioned anything too crazy, like, if they mentioned any, like, Chicago Bear references or Cubbies or stuff like that in there, but it wouldn't surprise me. So the final series that's kind of like a pitting deal against is between the Adventures of the Gummy Bears versus, as I can't get this out of my head because of fucking the comedian Brickleberry. That is the series that is completely animated, and it features the voice actor, the comedian, I should say, Daniel Tosh. So this was one of those series that I kind of was thinking, okay, this might be interesting. This might be another deal that, is aired on Comedy Central, so this is probably something that will be shown in the same limelight as, say, a South Park. This is one of those series I definitely was not really into because the fact that it's all it is just another one of those things where it's just for a chuckle, ha ha ha. And also it features like a tiny little bear, played by Daniel Tosh, which already you kind of can see where this is going. He's just kind of there with a dry sense of humor. He's just kind of there just putting in like punchlines and stuff like that. It's bizarre to say the least. With the Adventures of the Gummy Bears, it features bears. I think that's the only comparison you'll get out of this, ladies and gentlemen, so be prepared for a shock. It's one of those things where they have a bunch of these bears, and it's one of those things that is honestly one of the greatest things that Disney actually created. Basically, in medieval times, they battle against, magic, and they also have these deals where they incorporate knights, and they incorporate all these crazy deals. It's just absolutely a wonderful mystical world compared to the Brickleberry deal, where it's just, in a quote-unquote state park or national park, and all they're doing is just random, immature deals. Whereas, with the Adventures of the Gummy Bears, it's one of those things where, honestly, it's weird that this is something that, when you hear it, it's like, oh, they're basing this off of candy. It's like, yeah, that is the weird part. I'm surprised they didn't do, like, plugs during the commercials of this. But it is what it is. So honestly, what I can say about this is that, the Gummy Bears Adventures is one of those things where, it shows like fun, whimsical, magical adventures, where as Brickleberry is just another one of the things where it's like, adult style sense of humor. Go figure. So, but that's just me on that. So
interesting. I've never heard of the Gummy Bears before.
Really?
I have heard of Brickleberry or whatever, and I couldn't watch it. It was hard to get through. So I agree with you. Brickleberry is another one of those that you're like, there's a little too much of this. Like, that animation style, I think, is also like very crude, and you got to be ready for it.
Well, apparently they only went on for 3 seasons, so thank the Lord for that. But they had almost like 40 episodes. That is too much Brickleberry. That's too much Brickleberry for me. But
yeah,
it is what it is. Anyway, so I believe that you had 2 more to kind of wrap us up for this episode.
Yeah, well, I'll just mention Archer, because Archer is amazing. It's one of those that has great animation, very comic booky, and just an amazing theme of just like these characters go across time and like time eras and like scenarios. They used to just do a full like season that goes into one season to the next, and all of a sudden it went from they're going like sequential to now they're on Paradise Island, now they're in space, now they're in this, and it just follows, you know, this very charismatic player of a spy who's the best spy in the world, and how he lives and the people that surround him, and it's just amazing. Like, the first season is a little hard to get through, like most pilot seasons, but once you break through that, the characters really start molding into their, like, real selves, because you can tell it took the voice actors and the creators a little time to really make people who they want to be. Like, Pam is one of those characters that evolves, like, throughout time. She went from, like, this homey, like, little person to being this major story arc and amazing character. But I love Archer. I think it's great, and it's one of those that I don't care what settings they put him in, it's going to be enjoyable to watch.
No, you said everything that I could possibly have said. Archer is just that, it is that good. I will definitely agree with you.
It's weird, but it's awesome. And I guess my final animation that I really didn't want to watch when I first saw it, but I had to, and now I'm obsessed, is Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty only has 3 seasons. Apparently, in November, it's going to get its 4th season after a 2-year hiatus, I believe. Wow. And it is crazy how many times I've watched every episode, and I still enjoy it. And it's one of those that each episode doesn't necessarily feel like they belong together, but they hold up, and you can get something out of almost every episode. So it's dumb, but if you understand the lingo and what's going on, it's actually semi-deep. Like, there's one episode where, like, Rick is dating a hive mind, which is somebody who can, like, basically, like, take control of a planet. And, like, he's making her do all these amazing things because she runs the planet, and he's basically, you know, like, getting high, getting crazy, and his grandchildren are like, hey, like, let's go home, this is getting out of hand, the world is dying because you and your hive mind wants to have a good time, and this is another world, not Earth. And he's like, no, I'm doing what I want, like, stop taking care of me, and blah, blah, blah. And so they're like, okay, we'll go. And then they leave, and then the hive mind basically sees that they love and care for their grandpa so much, and he's just throwing his life away because he doesn't feel loved. And so she leaves him to go back to his family, and, like, this episode ends with him almost, like, trying to kill himself because he doesn't feel like he deserves to exist. But he doesn't. And, like, you just see, like, oh, like, it's kind of humorous, but at the same time you're like, this guy actually has issues that he can't handle, even though he's the smartest man in the universe. And he still has issues that, like, cause him to feel unloved and not wanted and doesn't know why he exists. So it's interesting. And you're like, holy cow, that was way deeper than I thought Rick and Morty should go. And that's what kind of the show creators talk about. They're like, we're glad that, like, people are enjoying our show, and it's funny because some people don't get it and just think it's funny, and other people get it and are like, whoa, they did that? And it's one of those that I'm stoked to watch the 4th season, so bring it on.
I definitely will probably make a time to actually try to binge watch the Rick and Morty deal, because it is definitely something that I've seen a lot of references from. I've seen a lot of just a lot of different people have been talking about how great it is. I haven't really given it a fair chance, but I definitely do think it's finally time for me to sit down, watch the first season, and if I like it, go into second one, third one. If I don't like it, it's one of those things where, like, hey, I gave it a chance, and maybe it's just not up to par with me. It definitely is a lot different than, say, Family Guy for all intents and purposes. But the point we're trying to make here, you guys, is the fact that we definitely do have two different minds, and we can kind of agree on one thing, is that, you know, animation definitely has evolved over the years from being mainly, you know, kid-friendly or family-friendly to something that can definitely broaden the imagination. I mean, you definitely can hit the fact of, Rick and Morty, all these other, animated series that have been doing very well. I mean, honestly, even something that is, like, family friendly, like, I think it was the Adventures of Gumball or Adventure Time. They kind of hit some of the, deals where it is something that could be for a specific genre, but it is still one of those things you kind of look at and think to yourself, man, this is still evolving. How is it that animation is still evolving even after being around for so long? Animation is probably like the oldest form of entertainment other than theater. I think that, in all honesty, this is kind of one of those things that I'm hoping that animation does not die out. And whether I'm a fan of certain animations or whether I'm not, it definitely is still one of those things that I can look at and think to myself, it's come a long way since probably, honestly, this is going to be one of those things where I'm going to be 100% wrong about this, but probably since, I think the first one I could think of is probably the Steamboat Willie, which, hey, ironically enough, hey, it's a Disney film. But that was back in the good old days. So
I'm pretty sure you're right. I think that was the first animation.
So to see that and see where we kind of evolved from there definitely shows that we have definitely been trying to broaden the horizon of animation. So guess what I'm getting out of this is that, hey, there's certain things I'm going to like and dislike, but I gotta admire the fact that they're at least trying something different with animation.
Yeah, keeping it alive. I agree. This was fun.
Definitely. So, guys, definitely give us a like on our Facebook fan page where we can look up more news articles and stuff like that. Definitely check us out on Twitter. I more likely will be on Twitter than my co-host, but at the same time, she's doing a lot of things, so I can definitely understand that. Definitely check me out at Real Effing Game. Definitely check out her Facebook fan page, though. It's a lot of great stuff, a lot of great photos, some that are just professionally done and some that are just, random stuff like that. But if you want to see more great stuff, definitely check out her Instagram at VictoriBelleCosplay. It's one of those things where you get a little more insight and you get a little more in depth of what my co-host does. And it's really cool. It's definitely really great. Definitely check us out on so many different podcasting formats to check out all the great content that we have blown up over the years. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Game Changers. So for Victory Bell, I've been NateFNGreat. We'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.